Bien, gente, después de 2 semanas de parón de esta videoreacción, por cuestiones profesionales, evidentemente, vamos a retomar en esta ocasión la tercera edición de nuestra videoreacción barra análisis de la ya famosa entrevista que Tucker Carlson le hizo al presidente de la Federación de Rusia, Vladímir Putin. Bien, nos quedamos a la espera de que Putin contestará a la pregunta de Tucker Carlson sobre cómo acabar con el nacionalismo, o mejor dicho, nacionalsocialismo, nazismo en Ucrania. Ahí lo dejamos y ahí vamos a continuar. Así que vamos a ver qué nos dice el señor Putin.
Послушайте меня. Ваш вопрос очень тонкий.
Listen to me. Your question is very subtle, and I can tell you what I think. Do not take offense.
Of course.
Он, казалось бы, тонкий, он очень противный, этот вопрос.
This question appears to be subtle. It is quite pesky.
Значит,
You say Hitler has been dead for so many years, 80 years. But his example lives on. People who exterminated Jews, Russians, and Poles are alive. And the president, the current president of today's Ukraine, applauds him in the Canadian Parliament, gives a standing ovation. Can we say that we have completely uprooted this ideology if what we see is happening today? That is what denazification is in our understanding. We have to get rid of those people who maintain this concept and support this practice and try to preserve it. That is what denazification is. That is what we mean.
Right. My question was a little more specific.
Se está refiriendo Putin a aquel ucraniano anticomunista que luchó en la Wehrmacht, el ejército alemán, la Segunda Guerra Mundial, contra Stalin, y que fue aplaudido como un resistente antirruso en el Parlamento canadiense. Canadá, que es básicamente uno de los pilares geopolíticos del orden capitalista internacional. Ahí Putin muy bien, estupendamente, estupendo Putin. Muy bien, sigamos.
It was, of course, not a defense of Nazis, neo or otherwise. It was a practical question. You don't control the entire country. You don't control Kiev. You don't seem like you want to. So how do you eliminate a culture or an ideology or feelings or a view of history in a country that you don't control? What do you do about that?
А вы знаете, как вам не покажется странным, в ходе переговоров в Стамбуле...
You know, as strange as it may seem to you, during the negotiations in Istanbul, we did agree that we have it all in writing. Neo-Nazism would not be cultivated in Ukraine, including that it would be prohibited at the legislative level. Mr. Carlson, we agreed on that. This, it turns out, can be done during the negotiation process. And there's nothing humiliating for Ukraine as a modern civilized state. Is any state allowed to promote Nazism? It is not, is it? That is it.
Will there be talks, and why haven't there been talks about resolving the conflict in Ukraine, peace talks?
Они были, они дошли до очень высокой стадии согласования позиций, сложно.
They have been. They reached a very high stage of coordination of positions in a complex process, but still they were almost finalized. But after we withdrew our troops from Kiev, as I have already said, the other side threw away all these agreements and obeyed the instructions of Western countries, European countries, and the United States to fight Russia to the bitter end. Moreover, the president of Ukraine has legislated a ban on negotiating with Russia. He signed a decree forbidding everyone to negotiate with Russia. But how are we going to negotiate if he forbade himself and everyone to do this? We know that he is putting forward some ideas about this settlement, but in order to agree on something, we need to have a dialogue.
Aunque haya pasado ya un cierto tiempo de esta entrevista de Tucker Carlson a Putin, tampoco mucho, Está de bastante actualidad esto que está diciendo Putin ahora mismo, debido a la última polémica, en este caso de Zelensky y del gobierno de Ucrania, no con Putin, sino con Jorge Mario Bergoglio, con el Papa Francisco, porque Francisco ha dicho que Zelensky tiene que asumir que tiene que negociar la paz con Rusia. Y esto parece ser que ha puesto en la picota al Papa y todo el neonazismo ucraniano y el liberalismo ucraniano antirruso y proeuropeísta y pro-OTAN ha señalado al Papa Francisco como objetivo a eliminar. Pues bueno, por dialéctica de clases, estados, imperios, a mi juicio no toca otra que estar del lado del Papa Francisco en este tema concreto. En este tema concreto, remarco. Así que muy de actualidad todo lo que está diciendo Putin y más ahora. Sigamos.
Is that not right?
Well, but you wouldn't be speaking to the Ukrainian president, you'd be speaking to the American president. When was the last time you spoke to Joe Biden?
I cannot remember when I talked to him. I do not remember. We can look it up.
You don't remember?
No. Why? Do I have to remember everything? I have my own things to do. We have domestic political affairs.
Well, he's funding the war that you're fighting, so I would think that would be memorable.
Well, yes, he funds, but I talked to him before the special military operation, of course. And I said to him then, by the way, I will not go into details, I never do, but I said to him then, I believe that you are making a huge mistake of historic proportions by supporting everything that is happening there, in Ukraine, by pushing Russia away. I told him repeatedly, by the way. I think that would be correct if I stop here.
What did he say?
Ask him, please. It is easier for you. You are a citizen of the United States. Go and ask him. It is not appropriate for me to comment on our conversation.
But you haven't spoken to him since before February of 2022?
No, we haven't spoken. Certain contacts are being maintained, though.
Normal.
Speaking of which, do you remember what I told you about my proposal to work together on a missile defense system?
Yes.
You can ask all of them. All of them are safe and sound, thank God. The former president, Condoleezza, is safe and sound, and I think Mr. Gates and the current director of the intelligence agency, Mr. Burns, the then ambassador to Russia, in my opinion, are very successful ambassador. They were all witnesses to these conversations. Ask them. Same here. If you are interested in what Mr. President Biden responded to me, ask him. At any rate, I talked to him about it.
I'm definitely interested, but from the outside, it seems like this could devolve or evolve into something that brings the entire world into conflict and could initiate a nuclear launch. And so why don't you just call Biden and say, let's work this out?
Porque no hay nada que resolver, es que no hay nada que hablar, es que Biden no quiere hablar. Bueno, Tucker Carlson sabe perfectamente que el Partido Demócrata, o por lo menos la facción hegemónica del Partido Demócrata, no quiere hablar con Putin de esto. Lo que Biden busca es destruir Rusia. No dialogar con Rusia, es destruirla. Sigamos.
What's there to work out? It's very simple. I repeat. We have contacts through various agencies. I will tell you what we are saying on this matter and what we are conveying to the US leadership. If you really want to stop fighting, you need to stop supplying weapons. It will be over within a few weeks. That's it. And then
Y aparte que a Biden tampoco le interesa entrar ni en un diálogo directo ni en un conflicto directo con Rusia. En todo caso, si hay un conflicto directo será de la Unión Europea, de la parte europea de la OTAN contra Rusia, que es por donde quiere ir Macron, también yo creo que para ejercer una cierta presión dentro del marco de la propia Unión Europea y a nivel internacional con respecto de la OTAN, para con una Alemania debilitada alzarse Francia como el hegemón de Europa Occidental. Alemania está debilitada desde el Nord Stream 2. Y eso que Alemania sigue siendo la gran potencia económica de la Unión Europea y la gran potencia económica de Europa, dejando aparte Rusia sin ningún tipo de discusión. Y eso que Francia y el Reino Unido, que no está en la Unión Europea, pero sí en la OTAN, están en el G7, al igual que Italia. España ni está ni se la espera, y de hecho vamos a menos. Esas son las perspectivas que hay. Sigamos.
Then we can agree on some terms. Before you do that, stop. What's easier? Why would I call him? What should I talk to him about? Or beg him for what?
And what messages do you get back?
You're going to deliver such and such weapons to Ukraine? Oh, I'm afraid, please don't. What is there to talk about?
Do you think NATO is worried about this becoming a global war or a nuclear conflict?
At least that's what they're talking about. And they're trying to intimidate their own population with an imaginary Russian threat. This is an obvious fact. And thinking people, not Philistines, but thinking people, analysts, those who are engaged in real politics, just smart people understand perfectly well that this is a fake. They're trying to fuel the Russian threat.
The threat I think you're referring to is a Russian invasion of Poland, Latvia, expansionist behavior. Can you imagine a scenario where you sent Russian troops to Poland?
Bueno, el comportamiento expansionista ya existe, que han invadido Ucrania y se han apropiado los rusos de un territorio que equivale casi al tamaño de la actual Inglaterra. Invasión ya ha habido, expansión ha habido. Otra cosa es hasta dónde quiere llegar Putin a nivel de expansión. Evidentemente no quiere conquistar toda Europa. No va por ahí la cosa. No. ¿Tucker lo sabe? Pues puede que sí. Digo yo, no lo sé. Porque a veces parece el hombre o es muy listo o es muy tonto. O las dos cosas a la vez, que también es viable. Sigamos. Muy interesante la entrevista.
Only in one case, if Poland attacks Russia.
Claro.
Why? Because we have no interest in Poland, Latvia, or anywhere else. Why would we do that? We simply don't have any interest. It's just threat-mongering.
Well, the argument, I know you know this, is that, well, he invaded Ukraine, he has territorial aims across the continent, and you're saying unequivocally you don't.
It is absolutely out of the question. You just don't have to be any kind of analyst. It goes against common sense to get involved in some kind of a global war. And a global war will bring all humanity to the brink of destruction. It's obvious. There are certainly means of deterrence. They have been scaring everyone with us all along. Tomorrow Russia will use tactical nuclear weapons. Tomorrow Russia will use that. No, the day after tomorrow. So what? In order to extort additional money from US taxpayers and European taxpayers in the confrontation with Russia in the Ukrainian theater of war. The goal is to weaken Russia as much as possible.
One of our senior United States senators from the state of New York, Chuck Schumer, said yesterday, I believe, that we have to continue to fund the Ukrainian effort or US soldiers, citizens could wind up fighting there. How do you assess that?
Claro, se financia la guerra en suelo ucraniano para que muera hasta el último ucraniano para asegurar la hegemonía de Estados Unidos en toda Europa y cercenar a Rusia y expulsar a Rusia de cualquier tipo de influencia en base a su fuerza geopolítica sobre Europa Central y Occidental. Eso está clarísimo. A esto van los impuestos de los ciudadanos estadounidenses. Las guerras se financian con impuestos. Y no solo con impuestos, cuidado. El atenazamiento de los estados capitalistas con respecto a sus clases dominantes y dominadas es absoluto. Y la guerra es el epítome más extremo, pero también más necesario del mantenimiento de este orden geopolítico, que se basa en la ley del valor, por cierto, que diría Marx. lo que ha dicho este senador de neoyorquino es totalmente pragmático, evidentemente. Sigamos.
Это провокация.
This is a provocation, and a cheap provocation at that.
Американские солдаты должны воевать.
Sí, es una provocación, pero es una frase pragmática, por lo menos desde la perspectiva de Estados Unidos. Eso está clarísimo. Putin sí lo comprende. O debería, vamos. Digo yo que debería comprenderlo. Sigamos.
I do not understand why American soldiers should fight in Ukraine. There are mercenaries from
Bueno, aquí se nota que lo ha comprendido perfectamente.
the United States there. The bigger number of mercenaries comes from Poland, with mercenaries from the United States in second place and mercenaries from Georgia in third place.
Безусловно.
Well, if somebody has the desire to send regular troops, that would certainly bring humanity to the brink of very serious global conflict. This is obvious. Do the United States need this? What for?
Национальной территории. У вас нечем заниматься.
Thousands of miles away from your national territory.
На границе полно. Проблемы с
Don't you have anything better to do?
государством.
You have issues on the border, issues with migration, issues with the national debt, more than $33 trillion. You have nothing better to do, so you should fight in Ukraine?
Понимая ситуацию, которая складывается.
Wouldn't it be better to negotiate with Russia, make an agreement,
Lo que ha propuesto Francisco.
already understanding the situation that is developing today, realizing that Russia will fight for its interests to the end?
К здравому смыслу.
And realizing this, actually return to common sense, start respecting our country and its interests, and look for certain solutions.
Кажется, что это гораздо умнее.
It seems to me that this is much smarter and more rational.
Who blew up Nord Stream?
You for sure.
I was busy that day. Nate, do you have I did not blow up
То есть
Nord
у вас-
Stream.
у
Thank
вас-
you, though.
У вас лично, может быть, есть алиби. У вас лично.
You personally may have an alibi, but the CIA has no such alibi.
Do you have evidence that NATO or the CIA did it?
Вы знаете, я не
You know, I won't get into details, but people always say in such cases, look for someone who is interested. But in this case, we should not only look for someone who is interested, but also for someone who has capabilities. Because there may be many people interested, but not all of them are capable of sinking to the bottom of the Baltic Sea and carrying out this explosion. These two components should be connected. Who is interested and who is capable of doing.
Lo ha resumido muy bien Putin. Cualquier fenómeno histórico geopolítico de conspiración tiene que, para saber quién lo ha hecho, entre comillas, hay que saber tratar de responder a dos preguntas. Primero, ¿quién quería hacerlo? Y segundo, ¿quién tenía capacidad de hacerlo? La tercera pregunta a responder, y esto va para los que hayan visto mi encuentro con Ignacio López Bru acerca de su libro Las cloacas del 11M, en el 20 aniversario del fatídico atentado terrorista del 11 de marzo de 2004 en España. Voy a dejarlo abajo en la descripción para que lo veáis. La tercera pregunta a responder es ¿quién se ha beneficiado de ese fenómeno acaecido? Tres preguntas. ¿Quién quería hacerlo? ¿Quién podía hacerlo? ¿Quién salió beneficiado de aquello? Respondiendo acertadamente a estas preguntas estaremos cerca de la respuesta. No cerca de la verdad del todo, pero sí, o no sabremos la verdad del todo, pero sí gran parte de ella sí. Sigamos.
It.
But I'm confused. I mean, that's the biggest act of industrial terrorism ever, and it's the largest emission of CO2 in history. Okay, so if you had evidence, and presumably given your security services, your intel services, you would, that NATO, the US, CIA, the West, did this, why wouldn't
Estados Unidos, la CIA, la OTAN, Occidente. Atención, Tucker Carlson asocia la idea de Occidente a Estados Unidos, CIA, OTAN. Eso. Esa es la idea de Occidente. En la hegemonía del capitalismo anglo-germánico protestante. Eso es Occidente. Todo lo demás no es Occidente, o está subordinado a esa idea de Occidente, que es una idea ideológica, es una nematología geopolítica, son planes y programas de hegemón. Quien define, quien determina, domina. Quien denomina, domina, era la frase, perdón. Quien denomina, domina. Esta frase, grabárosla en la cabeza. Quien denomina, nomina. Y la esencia de la política, como diría Marcelo Gullo, es la conspiración.
You present it and win a propaganda victory.
In the war of propaganda, it is very difficult to defeat the United States, because the United States controls all the world's media and many European media. The ultimate beneficiary of the biggest European media are American financial institutions. Don't you know that? So it is possible to get involved in this work, but it is cost prohibitive, so to speak. We can simply shine the spotlight on our sources of information, and we will not achieve results. It is clear to the whole world what happened, and even American analysts talk about it directly. It's true.
Yes, but here's a question you may be able to answer. You worked in Germany, famously. The Germans clearly know that their NATO partner did this, and it damaged their economy greatly. It may never recover. Why are they being silent about it? That's very confusing to me. Why wouldn't the Germans say something?
Lo sabes perfectamente, Tucker, pero bueno, la pregunta es para tu público.
This also confuses me. But today's German leadership is guided by the interests of the collective West rather than its national interests.
Y Occidente, el collective West que ha dicho Putin, no es más que la CIA, la OTAN y Estados Unidos. Alemania ahí no pinta absolutamente nada. Y es curioso porque fue un alemán, Lutero, dejo abajo en la descripción del vídeo mis vídeos sobre Occidente, el que se inventó la idea de Occidente. ¿Contra qué? Contra la Iglesia Católica y contra el mundo hispano. Contra la monarquía católica universal. La idea de Occidente es antiespañola. Y es antihispana, es anti-iberófona. Atención a lo que estoy diciendo. Esto seguramente Putin no lo sabe. No lo sabe porque no hay un poder hispano que pueda decir y afirmar esto. Vamos.
Otherwise, it is difficult to explain the logic of their action or inaction. After all, it is not only about Nord Stream 1, which was blown up, and the Nord Stream 2 was damaged, but one pipe is safe and sound and gas can be supplied to Europe through it. But Germany does not open it. We are ready, please. There's another route through Poland, called Yamal Europe, which also allows for large flow. Poland has closed it, but Poland packs from the German hand. It receives money from the pan-European funds, and Germany is the main donor to these pan-European funds.
Y Macron, con su política agresiva contra Rusia, ¿qué está haciendo? Aprovechar la debilidad de Alemania para acercarse a Polonia y convertirse en hegemón en Europa Occidental. Algo que ya intentó en su día José María Aznar, pero aquello fue abortado con el 11M. La dialéctica de clases, de estados y de imperios. Digamos, Vladímir.
Germany feeds Poland to a certain extent, and they close their route to Germany. Why? I don't understand. Ukraine, to which the Germans supply weapons and give money. Germany is the second sponsor of the United States in terms of financial aid to Ukraine. There are two gas routes through Ukraine. They simply closed one route, the Ukrainians. Open the second route and please get gas from Russia. They do not open it. Why don't the Germans say, look guys, we give you money and weapons, open up the valve, please, let the gas from Russia pass through for us. We're buying liquefied gas at exorbitant prices in Europe, which brings the level of our competitiveness and economy in general down to zero. Do you want us to give you money? Let us have the decent existence. Make money for our economy, because this is where the money we give you comes from. They refuse to do so. Why? Ask them. That is what is like in their heads. Those are highly incompetent people.
Well, maybe the world is breaking.
Son incompetentes para sus naciones, pero son totalmente competentes para los planes y programas de Biden. La Unión Europea es el patio trasero, tradicionalmente rico, cada vez menos, de Estados Unidos. Esto en Iberoamérica se tiene que entender.
Into two hemispheres, one with cheap energy, the other without. And I want to ask you that. If we're now a multipolar world, obviously we are, can you describe the blocks of alliances? Who is in each side, do you think?
Listen, you have said that the world is breaking into two hemispheres. A human brain is divided into two hemispheres. One is responsible for one type of activities, the other one is more about creativity and so on. But it is still one and the same head. The world should be a single whole. Security should be shared rather than meant for the golden billion. That is the only scenario where the world could be stable, sustainable, and predictable.
Es que me hace mucha gracia la cara de Tucker Carlson. Está flipando porque en su vida le han hablado de política de manera tan clara. Jamás. Nadie. Nadie. Ni Bukele ni Trump. Tucker Carlson descubriendo cómo funciona el mundo y cómo Putin entiende el mundo. Claro que también Putin pues tiene su discurso armonista, ¿no? De el mundo tiene que funcionar como uno solo, compartir seguridad, compartir energía. Bueno, Putin sabe perfectamente que esto no es así. Pero la cara de sorpresa, de flipada y al mismo tiempo de admiración de Tucker, sé que esto es un estudio psicológico de su persona, me es muy llamativa, digamos.
Until then, while the head is split in two parts, it is an illness, a serious adverse condition. It is a period of severe disease that the world is going through now. But I think that, thanks to honest journalism, this work is akin to work of the doctors. This could somehow be remedied.
Well, let's just give one example, the US dollar, which has kind of united the world. In a lot of ways, maybe not to your advantage, but certainly to ours. Is that going away as the reserve currency, the universally accepted currency? How have sanctions, do you think, changed the dollar's place in the world?
You know, to use the dollar as a tool of foreign policy struggle is one of the biggest strategic mistakes made by the US political leadership. The dollar is the cornerstone of the United States power. I think everyone understands very well that no matter how many dollars are printed, they are quickly dispersed all over the world. Inflation in the United States is minimal. It's about 3 or 3.4%, which is, I think, totally acceptable for the US. But they won't stop printing. What does the debt of $33 trillion tell us about? It is about the emission. Nevertheless, it is the main weapon used by the United States to preserve its power across the world. As soon as the political leadership decided to use the US dollar as a tool of political struggle, a blow was dealt to this American power. I would not like to use any strong language, but it is a stupid thing to do and a grave mistake.
Y sobre ese error se está desarrollando la política de los BRICS de desdolarización del mundo, cosa que ya comenté con Diego Ruzzarín en su día. Sigamos.
Look at what is going on in the world. Even the United States allies are now downsizing their dollar reserves. Seeing this, everyone starts looking for ways to protect themselves. but the fact that the United States applies restrictive measures to certain countries, such as placing restrictions on transactions, freezing assets, etc., causes grave concern and sends a signal to the whole world. What did we have here? Until 2022, about 80% of Russian foreign trade transactions were made in US dollars and euros. US dollars accounted for approximately 50% of our transactions with third countries, while currently it is down to 13%. It wasn't us who banned the use of the US dollar. We had no such intention. It was decision of the United States to restrict our transactions in US dollars. I think it is complete foolishness from the point of view of the interests of the United States itself and its taxpayers, as it damages the US economy, undermines the power of the United States across the world. By the way, our transactions in yuan accounted for about 3%. Today, 34% of our transactions are made in rubles, and about as much, a little over 34% in yuan. Why did the United States do this? My only guess is self-conceit.
No solo la vanidad, es que el dólar, o sea, el dinero fiduciario, no es dinero ficticio, es dinero imperial. Bueno, no es dinero, es moneda imperial. Y el valor del dólar reside en que es la moneda de un imperio. Y es un instrumento para asegurar que ese imperio se imponga prácticamente casi a escala universal. ¿Qué pasa? Que la batalla contra el dólar no es una batalla contra un dinero ficticio, es una batalla contra una moneda imperial. Esto es algo que a los economistas liberales o marxistas o del palo que sea se les olvida. ¿Por qué? Porque reducen la moneda a dinero. Y la moneda es mucho más importante que el dinero. A nivel de institución cultural histórica. La moneda es un instrumento de poder político y de poder geopolítico. Lo fue el real de A8, lo fue la libra esterlina, lo fue el franco francés, y lo es el dólar. Y lo está empezando a ser de nuevo el rublo y el yuan. Toda moneda, además, es una institución estatal, porque lleva un sello estatal. Entonces, ¿qué es la emisión de moneda? Pues siguiendo a Clausewitz, es hacer la guerra por otros medios. No es más que eso. No tomemos la moneda nunca como un mero signo de intercambio. Es mucho más importante.
They probably thought it would lead to full collapse, but nothing collapsed. Moreover, other countries, including oil producers, are thinking of and already accepting payments for oil in yuan. Do you even realize what is going on or not? Does anyone in the United States realize this? What are you doing? You are cutting yourself off. All experts say this. Ask any intelligent and thinking person in the United States what the dollar means for the US.
But
You're killing it with your own hands.
I think that's I think that's a fair assessment. The question is what comes next, and maybe you trade one colonial power for another, much less sentimental and forgiving colonial power. I mean, is the BRICS, for example, in danger of being completely dominated by the Chinese economy in a way that's not good for their sovereignty?
Lo dije en la segunda videoreacción. Tucker Carlson es un hombre político de Trump. ¿Qué quiere Trump? Alejar a Putin de China, alejar a Rusia de China y aliarse con Rusia contra China. Por cierto, esto es lo que defiende mi apreciado Guillermo Moreno, también en Argentina. El enemigo de Estados Unidos no es Rusia, es China. Esto lo entiende Trump. Pero para la facción del capital financiero del Partido Demócrata, el enemigo es Rusia también. Trump quiere acabar con la hegemonía china. Y para eso necesita a Rusia. China necesita a Rusia en tanto que es una extensión de sus proyectos mercantiles y de la Franja y la Ruta. Rusia por sí sola no puede hegemonizar ningún proyecto imperial. Y aquí es donde se equivocan los duginistas y donde se equivoca Alexander Dugin. El tema es que Rusia tiene que ser el compañero de viaje secundario o de Estados Unidos o de China. Hoy los de China. ¿Podría ser lo de Estados Unidos? Eso es lo que quiere Trump. La estrategia de Biden va en contra de los planes y programas de la facción burguesa que representa Trump. ¿Conseguiría convencer a Putin Trump? Y en el caso de acabar con el hegemón chino, ¿qué haría Estados Unidos con Rusia una vez que China haya sido destruida? Es otra pregunta a contestar, que no planteamos en el segundo vídeo, pero en este sí. ¿Podría Estados Unidos buscar después la destrucción de Rusia, una vez que el enemigo principal, China, ha sido destruido? ¿Qué se podría estar agitando alrededor de Putin si él, por ejemplo, deja el poder y un seguidor suyo se alía con Estados Unidos contra China? Trump busca romper los BRICS a través de uno de los aliados fundamentales de Pekín, que es Moscú. Atención a lo que estoy diciendo porque es una posibilidad importante. Putin no es comunista, solo utiliza la parafernalia soviética para asegurar su poder en Rusia, también aceptando ciertas coherencias históricas, porque no hay que decirlo, le es fácil hacerlo. No tiene los problemas de pecado capital que hay en otras naciones, como en España, más que nada porque la Unión Soviética ganó la Segunda Guerra Mundial. Pero el enemigo real del capital internacional no es Rusia, es la República Popular China, cuyo éxito se vende como capitalista para que los trabajadores de medio mundo no apliquen el desarrollo de las fuerzas productivas chinas, tal y como nosotros explicamos en nuestro vídeo sobre si China era capitalista o socialista. Bueno, así se domina el mundo, que diría Baños.
Do you worry about that?
¿Te preocupa eso? Le preocupa a Trump, a Putin no. Bueno, a Putin le puede preocupar en tanto que Putin yo creo que sabe que Rusia no puede hegemonizar el mundo. Y como lo sabe, a Rusia solo le queda optar o por Estados Unidos o por China. Estados Unidos le dijo que no a Rusia en la OTAN en su día, con Clinton y con Bush II y con Obama. ¿Y Trump qué quiere? Revertir eso. Ahora, ¿podría hacerlo? Vamos a ver qué dice Vladímir.
Well, we have heard those boogeyman stories before. It is a boogeyman story.
Buen actor, Putin.
We're neighbors with China. You cannot choose neighbors just as you cannot choose close relatives. We share a border of 1,000 kilometers with them. This is number one. Second, we have a centuries-long history of coexistence.
Bueno, de consistencia y conflicto, sobre todo en el siglo XIX y en el XX, conflicto chino-soviético.
We're used to it. Third, China's foreign policy philosophy is not aggressive. Its idea is to always look for compromise, and we can see that. The next point is as follows. We are always told the same boogeyman story, and here it goes again. Through an euphemistic form, but it is still the same boogeyman story. The cooperation with China keeps increasing. The pace at which China's cooperation with Europe is growing is higher and greater than that of the growth of Chinese-Russian cooperation.
Esto es muy importante. Si el mayor socio comercial de la Unión Europea es la República Popular China y el mayor socio comercial de Rusia es la República Popular China y Rusia está entre China y la Unión Europea, a pesar de la guerra que quiere Biden y que quiere Macron, o aparentemente quiere Macron, el presidente de Francia, ¿qué sentido tiene para Rusia salirse de esa atenaza de cooperación comercial entre China y la Unión Europea, facilitada por la propia potencia de China? ¿Qué le puede ofrecer Trump a cambio? ¿Comercio a través de Alaska? ¿Del estrecho de Bering?
Ask Europeans, aren't they afraid? They might be, I don't know. But they are still trying to access China's market at all costs, especially now that they are facing economic problems. Chinese businesses are also exploring the European market. Do Chinese businesses have small presence in the United States? Yes, the political decisions are such that they are trying to limit their cooperation with China. It is to your own detriment, Mr. Tucker, that you are limiting cooperation with China. You are hurting yourself. It is a delicate matter, and there are no silver bullet solutions, just as it is with the dollar.
Ahora está pasando mal Tucker.
So, before introducing any illegitimate sanctions, illegitimate in terms of the Charter of the United Nations, one should think very carefully. For decision makers, this appears to be a problem.
So you said a moment ago that the world would be a lot better if it weren't broken into competing alliances, if there was cooperation globally. One of the reasons you don't have that is because the current American administration is dead set against you. Do you think if there were a new administration after Joe Biden that you would be able to reestablish communication with the US government? Or does it not matter who the president is?
Esto va por Trump también. La otra opción. Pero ahí domina Putin.
I will tell you, but let me finish the previous thought. We, together with my colleague and friend, President Xi Jinping, set a goal to reach $200 billion of mutual trade with China this year. We have exceeded this level.
Estos son todos los motivos por los cuales Rusia no se puede salir de su alianza con China. Frontera, relaciones políticas fluidas desde hace tiempo y monto de millones de dólares, de rublos barra yuanes, en materia comercial, mercantil. ¿Qué puede ofrecer Trump a cambio de eso? ¿Qué le ofrece Putin? Cooperación internacional. ¿Para qué? Para que los dejen en paz. Para que los dejen comerciar. Aquí son más enemigos del comercio los Estados Unidos que Rusia y China. Ahí escotado si estuvieras vivo. Descanse en paz.
According to our figures, our bilateral trade with China totals already $230 billion, and the Chinese statistics says it is $240 billion. One more important thing. Our trade is well balanced, mutually complementary in high-tech, energy, scientific research and development. It is very balanced. As for BRICS, where Russia took over the presidency this year, the BRICS countries are, by and large, developing very rapidly.
Y han superado en Producto Interno Bruto al G7. ¿En qué le beneficiaría a Rusia salirse de ahí para entrar en el G7? ¿Qué le ofrecería el G7 a Rusia a cambio de salirse de los BRICS? ¿Y qué le ofrecería Trump al resto del G7 europeo a cambio de que Rusia se salga de los BRICS? ¿Es posible resolver estas preguntas? ¿Es posible responderlas con acierto? Y más cuando son meras conjeturas. En fin.
Look, if memory serves me right, back in 1992, the share of the G7 countries in the world economy amounted to 47%, whereas in 2022 it was down to, I think, a little over 30%. The BRICS countries accounted for only 16% in 1992, but now their share is greater than that of the G7. It has nothing to do with the events in Ukraine. This is due to the trends of global development and world economy, as I mentioned just now. And this is inevitable. This will keep happening. It is like the rise of the sun. You cannot prevent the sun from rising. You have to adapt to it. How do the United States adapt? With the help of force, sanctions, pressure, bombings, and use of armed forces. This is about self-conceit. Your political establishment does not understand that the world is changing.
Es engreimiento, pero sobre todo es insensatez y desesperación. Es desesperación porque, sí, el mundo está cambiando. Y no subjetivamente, objetivamente.
Under objective circumstances. And in order to preserve your level, even if someone aspires, pardon me, to the level of dominance, you have to make the right decisions in a competent and timely manner. Such brutal actions, including with regard to Russia and, say, other countries, are counterproductive. This is an obvious fact. It has already become evident. You just asked me if another leader comes and changes something. It is not about the leader. It is not about the personality of a particular person. I had a very good relationship with, say, Bush. I know that in the United States, he was portrayed as some kind of a country boy who does not understand much. I assure you that this is not the case. I think he made a lot of mistakes with regard to Russia, too. I told you about 2008 and the decision in Bucharest to open the NATO's doors for Ukraine and so on. That happened during his presidency. He actually exercised pressure on the Europeans. But in general, on a personal human level, I had a very good relationship with him. He was no worse than any other American or Russian or European politician. I assure you, he understood what he was doing as well as others. I had such personal relationship with Trump as well. It is not about the personality of the leader, it is about the elite's mindset. If the idea of domination at any cost, based also on forceful actions, dominates the American society, nothing will change. It will only get worse. But if, in the end, one comes to the awareness that the world has been changing due to the objective circumstances, and that one should be able to adapt to them in time, using the advantages that the US still has today, then perhaps something may change. Look, China's economy has become the first economy in the world in purchasing power parity. In terms of volume, it overtook the US a long time ago. The USA comes second, then India, 1.5 billion people, and then Japan, with Russia in the 5th place.
Y Alemania ha superado a Japón hace poco, pero bueno.
Russia was the first economy in Europe last year, despite all the sanctions and restrictions. Is it normal from your point of view? Sanctions, restrictions, impossibility of payments in dollars, being cut off from SWIFT services, sanctions against our ships carrying oil, sanctions against airplanes, sanctions in everything, everywhere. The largest number of sanctions in the world which are applied against Russia. And we have become Europe's first economy during this time. The tools that US uses don't work. Well, one has to think about what to do. If this realization comes to the ruling elites, then yes, then the first person of the state will act in anticipation of what the voters and the people who make decisions at various levels expect from this person. Then maybe something will change.
Lo dejamos aquí porque ya ha pasado media hora y, sinceramente, esta tercera parte de la videoreacción es en la que menos he hablado porque las explicaciones que Putin da son tan contundentes y tan bien elaboradas que apenas necesitan comentarios por mi parte. Simplemente decir que está claro. cuando Estados Unidos entienda que el mundo ha cambiado y que su papel tiene que ser otro, eso es lo que está diciendo Putin, la relación será mejor. Mientras no lo asuman, pues Rusia seguirá otros caminos. Caminos en los cuales no les conviene llevarse mal con el nuevo hegemón global, que es la República Popular China y su socialismo. Nos vemos en la cuarta y última videoreacción, que espero que sea la semana que viene. Pulgar arriba, dejad vuestro comentario abajo. Suscribiros a este canal de YouTube si queréis más contenido audiovisual de materialismo político, que es el marco teórico y filosófico de nuestro canal. Compartid este contenido con familiares, amigos y allegados, sean rusos, ucranianos, alemanes, británicos, estadounidenses o hispanos, iberófonos, etc. Activad la campanita para conocer las novedades de mi canal. Si queréis apoyarme económicamente, PayPal o Patreon. Y, por supuesto, espero que hayáis disfrutado, tanto como yo, de este speech magistral, clase magistral de Relaciones Internacionales y Geopolítica del presidente de la Federación Rusa, Vladímir Putin, ante el flipado, en el buen sentido de la palabra, periodista estadounidense de Trump, Tucker Carlson. Sin más, nos vemos en la siguiente edición. Un saludo a todos y hasta la próxima.